All right, happy Friday. Terry Caliendo, Dedicated Managers, back for another exciting edition of Going Wild with Dedicated Managers. I don't know. Today I want to talk about the exciting topic of OAuth 2.0. I've been having to dig into this for a project, so I just kind of want to lay down some of my thoughts and understanding as I dig into this specification. So previously I had done a whole series on taking a front end and using Auth 0, which is a OAuth 2.0 compliant service to allow people to log into the application, the front end Vue.js application. And in doing this in a project for a client, I really had to dig into the OAuth 2.0 spec to understand what I was doing as far as trying to get these different things called scopes or ID tokens or all kinds of stuff that hopefully I'll have a chance to talk about. In this episode, I'm just going to talk briefly, give an overview of kind of the specs and where you can find them and how you can start to read them. And my goal with this tutorial or this series that I'm hopefully going to do more of is to help you understand the OAuth 2.0 and this other thing called OpenID from the RFC specification, because this is the authority. This is where it all comes from. You can read stuff on the internet. You can go to forums or posts and ask questions. But this is the ultimate answer of where everything is going to come from, or the ultimate holy grail, I don't know, of where the answers are going to come from, because this is what defines everything. This is where everybody's referring to. So if you're having a discrepancy with either a coworker or a client or somebody, that you can just take them to the specification here. This is produced by the IETF. They're the ones that have created this specification that everybody's referring to. So you can take whoever it is that's disagreeing with you right to the specification, or if something's not working right, take them to the specification or take it to the specification and figure out what's going on. So that's my goal, is to give this foundation of being able to look through this document and relate it back to real world things, like let's talk about an app and how it's used. So first I should briefly explain the difference between the OAuth 2.0 and the OpenID. OAuth 2.0 is a specification at its core, is to allow you as a owner of something, give a third party access to that something and make changes to it without giving them your username and password. That's pretty much the whole thing, is you don't want your username and password floating around on the internet. So there's got to be another way to allow third parties to access your stuff. And I'll talk about that in a second, more in a second. The OpenID Connect is actually an extension. It is an authentication built on top of OAuth 2.0. So the OAuth 2.0 specification is extensible. And I'll talk about that maybe in another upcoming exciting podcast, if we'll call these podcasts, of how it's extensible and allows for something like this OpenID thing to work on top of it. So again, this is built. Can't click off of it. Built on top of the Auth 2 spec. This is not an IETF. This is something that another foundation has created, but it is not an official spec as far as I can tell. The OAuth 2.0 is the spec, and then this is something that extends it. Other things could extend it in different ways, but OpenID is the one that has taken off as the premier extension of the 2.0 authorization framework. So again, OAuth 2.0 talks about giving permission to make changes to things that I own, whereas the OpenID extends that to allow me to give information about myself, like who am I, my email address, my avatar, a picture of me, my phone number, that kind of stuff is allowed by the OpenID spec. So let's jump in a little further or get to and see some real world examples back to this page here. So this is draw.io. This is a free service. You can go to draw.io and it's going to allow you to do some drawings and make some cool stuff. Here I've drawn a rounded rectangle with another rectangle, and let's pretend this is my amazing job that I spent 10 hours on producing for a client, right? And I need to save it. Well, they don't have their own storage. What they actually do is allow you to save to other storage systems. So you can see I'm not logged in here. I'm working on an incognito window here, and I'm not logged into the system that you can really see, my name somewhere. So if I go to save this, let's see what happens. It pulls up this screen here, which now, interestingly, I can save my diagram that I created to different third-party applications: Google Drive, OneDrive, Dropbox. These are storage hosting services. So Draw.io said, hey, we don't need to manage a hosting service for your files. Just plug in one of your other services that you have, or just download the file to your computer and upload it next time you want to work on it. But what's cool is you can integrate directly with, say, your Google Drive. So this is actually using the OAuth 2.0 spec. And what's going to happen is when I click on Google Drive here, it's first going to ask me some questions that are not quite part of the spec yet. And then when I click this button, now I'm getting into the spec here, where Draw.io has sent me over to accounts.google.com to sign in to my Google account, so that Draw.io can save this file, this drawing, to my Google Drive and have it sit in my drive. Now, I'm not going to actually log in and finish that process, but I just wanted to show that that's the start of it. And ultimately, this thing can place and retrieve documents from my Google Drive. And so let me kind of show where that is in the specification here. So if I scroll down, and we'll jump in at some point, I'll start talking about all this stuff. But the main thing we want to get into, I think, is 4.1, the code grant here. So this is the specification for the flow of a third party that has a secure portion to it. So just real quickly, what we were talking about in this application here, this is a front-end application that's interacting with resources. This thing cannot have any secrets because it runs on the browser. Everything is presented to the user. The user can ultimately see any secret information, password stuff I put in there. So it's not a secure application or a secure portion of the application. So back to the spec here. That is the, ultimately we'll talk about, is the implicit grant flow, where the client cannot guard its secrets. But in this flow that we're talking about here, we're in authorization code grant, and this is the type is code. The authorization is a code. This is the code flow. I'll say it again, code. And the code flow needs the client that is requesting access to something to be able to store secret information. So it needs to run on a server somewhere that nobody else can touch. So that was something that threw me for a long time. I didn't understand what this client was, and that it could change from being a server behind the scenes or to a front-end JavaScript application. I thought the client was the person, but that's actually the resource owner. So we'll get into all that stuff as we get deeper into, if I continue on with this series, if there's some interest, or if I keep being interested, I'll get into that stuff. But right now I want to get back to high level. And so let's talk about what happened here on this. So when I clicked to save this diagram, and it took me over to the accounts.google here, that is, let's talk about what that is. So I am the resource owner. That's me, the person clicking the buttons right now, the person that's talking to you. I have a resource, a place that I want to give access to, and that would be my Google Drive. I own that spot on Google Drive. That's my resource that I am the owner of. And the user agent is my my web browser. And my web browser is, in this case, it's the thing that's showing this stuff here. That's the user agent. Back to the spec here. And so the browser and the user agent in this case are the draw.io website. Now, the browser and the user agent, or the browser can be the user agent and the client can be my Vue.js app in a different app. But here, the front end app and the user agent are both this thing right here, are both in this draw.io website portion here. And so what's happening is the user agent is sending me over to the authorization server where I am going to log in. So in the example that I just showed there, this is the accounts.google.com server. So I'm going to sign in there. I'm going to authenticate there, and it's going to send, that's what this is showing here too. So these two are broken up going in the same direction. But A sends you over to, it takes a client identifier, which identifies this client, who it is with this app, right? Because there's a million clients out there. It could be this draw.io. It could be this birthday pilot thing I'll talk about. There's going to be different clients that are trying to might give access, me, the resource owner, might give access to my stuff. So let's start back here at the beginning here. The user agent, the website here, is displayed to me. It redirects me over to the authorization server, which is the accounts.google thing that popped up. And I log into my Google account using my username and password. I am on Google's website. Remember, when I do all this stuff here, I'm on google.com. So I'm putting my username and password into google.com. I'm not putting it into draw.io. So draw.io is not getting my password information. And so once I finish that process, what's going to happen is the authorization server, accounts.google.com, is going to send back an authorization code, and it's just a weird looking thing that just looks like, it just looks like this. That's all it is. It's just a bunch of gobbledygook without the spaces. It's going to send back that code, but it's going to remember the code, and that user agent, which is this website, is now going to pass that code, this authorization code. It's going to send it back to the client, which is the server in this case. So draw.io has a server on the back end that it's going to send that code to, and then that client, which now is on the back end, that server back end is a closed system where no public information can be seen, so it can store a password. And so it's gonna take that code, it's gonna send it over to the authorization server, and along with a redirection URI which says where to bring it back to. But it's going to send it over, that code over. It's also going to authenticate. It doesn't show it here, but it's also going to authenticate and say, yes, I am a client that's allowed to send you this code. And then the authorization server is going to send back an access token. And now that access token can be used to go and save the file that ultimately I'm trying to save, this thing here, the file that represents the saved version of this is now going to be saved on my Google Drive. So where is it here? So with that access token, this client can now make a call to the resource server and make changes or save that document to my Google account. Now that's not shown here. So real quickly, I'll show one more example. Actually, I've got two more examples lined up. I'll try and blow through them real quickly. Another real-world example here. This is a site that allows somebody to, or allows me to programmatically send a happy birthday wall post to a friend on my Facebook account. So what I'm allowing is I'm going to allow this third-party website, this birthdayfb.com. If I click connect with Facebook, I'm going to allow this thing here this site here to post to my friends, hey buddy, happy birthday, hope you're having a great day, on my behalf as part of my account. So that's how services like that work, the third-party services. So if I click, if I want to allow this application to post to my Facebook account and other people's pages on behalf of me, I have to give it access to my Facebook account. Now, I don't want to give it my username and password, right? I don't want birthday.com to have my username and password, because then if they lose it, now it's easy for somebody to go and log into my account and wreak havoc. So we're going to do this token process where I'm going to log into my Facebook account. And again, I'm not going to finish it, but notice I clicked on that link. It took me over to facebook.com, and now I'm logging into facebook.com, and ultimately I'll log in here, and then Facebook will say, hey, do you want to give access to birthdayfb.com to post on other people's walls for you? And I'll click yes or okay. And then it's allowed by my account. And then I can go and revoke it later through Facebook. I can go and revoke the permission that I gave them, or that access token, or that code that ultimately becomes a token. I can go and revoke that so that they can't post anymore. And now all my control and my username and password is at one place. And so it's more secure for me as an end user. So again, if we go back to the Auth 2.0 spec, or the spec here, in this case, again, this birthday pilot thing, it's got a front end that I'm using to redirect me, that redirects me over to facebook.com, which is the authorization server. And then I would authenticate. That's why the authorization server, or facebook.com, was asking me to log in. After I was to log in, it would ask me for permission if I wanted to allow the birthday pilot to post on my wall. And then it would give me what are called scopes, and we'll talk about that stuff in the future. And those scopes are stored, and a code is sent back to the user agent, the front end here, which ultimately is going to send that authorization code back to its server, and its server that's secured is going to log in to with its server credentials. With Facebook, it creates a developer account with Facebook so that it can log in and do things. But it's also going to have my authorization code, which is going to allow this client, this backend server of Birthday Pilot, to do stuff for me using my authorization code. So it's going to send that code to the server, and the server is going to send back an access token. And the reason this process happens with this extra step, with this code, instead of the authorization server or Facebook just sending back a token for this user agent to send back to the back end, is because this is insecure here somewhat, in that the user agent here, or the browser, somebody could go into the browser and actually get that token. So that's why it sends a code first that becomes obsolete after it gets sent back and replaced for a token. Now that token, you see the code comes to here. This thing passes the code over to the client, which is the backend server, and now the client goes and gets a token back. And this code is no longer, this code which was available on the user agent is no longer useful. It's gone. It's a code that's it's a one-time code that nobody can use again. But it was in the public wild for a second. Now it did go through an HTTPS connection, so it's not totally insecure, but still a hacker that might have access to my browser, or if somebody came to my my browser and right-clicked and did inspect, chose to inspect it, it could see the cookies and get the code or the token if the token was there. But the token is never there because that code gets sent to the back end. The back end goes and gets the token and saves the token here. The token never comes back to the user agent, so the token is stored here. And so now we know it's in a safer environment. And that's different from the case of what we did here, and I'll talk about that in another exciting episode. So hopefully that was somewhat understandable. I'll do one more here real quick. same concept as the others. Here's Auth 0. If I wanted to log into Auth 0, and this gets confusing, this is probably a bad example because when I click log into Auth 0, I actually go to another auth0.com, but in this case, I'm going to their authentication server. So they're actually using their own third-party service to log into their service. So this part here is what's called the tenant. So they've got their own tenant at their service. But you can see that, once I get there, I can log in with different types of credentials. I could log in with my Google account, I could log in with my LinkedIn account, or I could just use a traditional username and password here. So again, if I click login with Google, it's going to take me over to accounts.google.com to authenticate again through them and get credentials. And that's actually starting to get into the OpenID spec there. And it's actually you've got an extra. We actually went to this authorization server. So I went to auth0.com. Auth0.com sent me to its authorization server, auth0.auth0.com, and then that authentication server sent me over to Google's authentication server. So we're actually over here in another, party land before we come back. But the process is the same. It's just those two kind of merge into one. Might talk about that in the future, but hopefully that was somewhat understandable. So I've been babbling for about 21 minutes here. Hopefully that was somewhat understandable and gets you intrigued to listen for some more. I'm going to hopefully do some more and really dig into what all of this stuff is directly in the spec, and we'll start to talk about roles, protocol flow. We just talked about we were down here talking about the obtaining authorization and the grant versus or the code versus the implicit grant types. But that's stuff you'll see when you're programming, third-party applications to use this spec, like Auth 0's programming code to do this stuff. You're going to need to know these different pieces, a lot of these different pieces, to really understand what's going on. Mostly the roles, the authorization grant, and scope. And this stuff, the code versus implicit grant. So hopefully I'll get more into it and tie it back to this actual IETF spec, which is the end all be all. It's the the root, it's the Yoda, it's the force, it's the bright side of the force, hopefully. So this is where everybody pulls from to do their implementation. So if you can go back to here and point to this thing, you can usually solve a lot of problems. Or figure out where things are going wrong. All right, again, so thanks for joining me, Terry Caliendo, Dedicated Managers, Technology Consulting. I do these videos try to do them on Fridays on a whim. Don't do a lot of a ton of planning behind it, so be cautious of anything I say, and feel free to ask questions in the comments. As far as sometimes my brain works differently from my voice, where I'm thinking one thing and I say another, and that's just because I'm kind of talking on the fly here. I just don't have the time. I do client work all week, and this is just trying to do some extra bonus to help people understand some of the stuff I'm coming across and potentially struggling with. So don't take everything as written in stone. Don't take everything as being perfect. Understand that I make mistakes, and I'm not going to go back and record them over because I just don't have the time for that. So again, Terry Caliendo, Dedicated Managers, here to help you out if you need any help with a project. Third-party consulting, we'd be glad to help you finish a project. We'd be happy to take over a project for you. I assume you're not watching this video if you're, if you don't know anything about technology and you've got a project. You're probably more of a developer. So if you need some help with development, give us a call. Make sure to subscribe to the Dedicated Managers channel here. It's youtube.com/Dedicated Managers. You can find the channel here, hit subscribe, and you'll get updated each time I come out with a new video. Or and we'll try and keep you happy. Got up to 287 subscribers. I think that's pretty awesome. I was excited at one point just to hit 100. My new goal is to hit 1,000. Throw another woohoo party when I hit 1,000. All right, so that should wrap it up. If you enjoyed this video, please throw something in the comments and inspire me to do more, or maybe redo it if it was totally ununderstandable. Anything, just throw a comment down there, throw a like, hit a subscribe, do what you can. Thanks a lot, Terry Caliano, Dedicated Managers. Have a great day. Happy programming.